Aloha and welcome back to the 2022 HLA conference. My name is Jade Tsunouchi and I will be facilitating this session. We're honored to have Ikaika Kelly Ike and Kylie Monroe from the UH Manoa LIS program present Ina Ao Ka Ike in the Currents of Knowledge. And it's also a presentation that is featuring our ALA president, Lessa Pelayo-Lozada. We're very grateful to have all of you here. Ikaika, Kylie's, and Lessa's bios are available on the conference website. This recording will be available to all conference attendees. You are all muted, so please type your questions in the chat. Now over to you, our presenters.
All right, thank you so much, Jade, and aloha mai kako. As she said, Ikaika Keli'iliki is my name. I'm the current president of Na Hawaii Imiloa Hui Haumana, which is a student organization in the library science program here at UH Manoa. And our goal and our aim is to support Native Hawaiian students and professionals in the field of library science and to, incorporate Hawaiian methodologies, ideologies in the field. And I'm so grateful to be part of this roundtable. Thankful for Lessa for working with us and for making this happen. So yeah, Kylie, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Hi, I'm Kylie Monroe. I am currently the president of the American Library Association student chapter. And so I am glad to be here. Thank you for including me.
All right. And Lessa, I don't think that you require that much for introduction, but you could tell us just a little bit about yourself to get going.
Yeah, of course. So I'm Lessa Pelayo-Lozada. I'm currently an adult services assistant manager at the Palos Verdes Library District, which is in Southern California. I have mostly spent my career as a children's librarian. I received my MLIS from UCLA in 2009, and I wrote a thesis during my time at UCLA called Ho'omau, the Perpetuation of Hawaiian Culture in Southern California, which looked at how Hawaiian culture is perpetuated in the diaspora through information, but not information in the form of books and text necessarily, the traditional forms that we might think of, but rather through cultural connections, events, and oral traditions. So I looked at kind of the growth of civic clubs and hula halau and how that helped us to maintain and to create community. I graduated from library school during the last recession. It took me quite a few years to find a library job full-time. As I was preparing for this morning, I texted my husband. I was like, did you know I've only been a full-time librarian for 10 years? Like, the journey has seemed so much longer, right? Because I started as a page, and then was a clerk and then a part-time librarian for so many years. So I did kind of the Southern California hustle of working multiple library jobs at once until I got my first job at the Glendale Public Library, which is about an hour from my house. And then after that, I went to the Rancho Cucamonga Public Library, which is an hour and a half from my house each direction. And then I was finally able to go back to Palos Verdes, which is, 15 minutes from my house. So it's been a really wonderful and interesting experience, I think, kind of weaving through all the different possibilities that librarianship brings, because this was not the path that I thought that I would be on. I did not also think I would be ALA president as a frontlines library worker. So that's just a little bit about my background, but I'm here for all of your questions, questions in the chat, additional things. I'm pretty much an open book. So hopefully I can bring, some wow to you folks and we have a good time today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And that's incredible. And it really ties back into the name of this roundtable, the theme of this conference, because we chose the name Ina Ao Ka Ike, or in the currents of knowledge, in relation to this, the theme of voyaging, because it is the idea of, going to a new place. And, the word ao here is translated as currents, but it has related meanings of flow, movement, also time, periods of time. It's one of the cool things about Hawaiian language, all the polysemy in it. but yeah, so you've gone through all these different stages that I'm sure a lot of us as well have have experienced as well. I mean, I'm currently in like the entry level of the library land here, like the lowest of the lowest, and I'm working towards becoming a librarian. And you've been through that, so we're really thrilled to have this, to have you be able to talk about like how that's been for you and how that's gone. So yes, thank you so much. And especially as a Kanaka Maoli as well yourself, and a Kanaka of the diaspora, there's many of us that can relate to that as well here. It's like your experience with that and going through library school, going through professional life. So yeah. Kylie, do you want to take the first few questions?
Sure, absolutely. The field of librarianship is changing so rapidly. What do you feel is the biggest challenge right now?
So right now, I think we've heard it in both keynotes yesterday and today's, that the biggest challenge that we're facing is censorship, right? I mean, they are coming in waves of attacks on not just books, but also programs and displays. You know, there have been stories of Pride Month displays that just disappear, walk right out the door, and all those books have to be replaced. So that's one of the biggest challenges that we're facing on really a big picture level right now, but on a very practical level that I think affects the job outlook and how we operate on a day-to-day as library workers and as aspiring library workers and library school students, is the reality of decreasing budgets in a post-pandemic and a continuing pandemic world, right? Our institutions are always looking for ways to cut costs. They're always looking for space. And so we consistently have to re-articulate our value over and over again. And while this is not new, I do think that it has escalated in the last couple of years, especially, even though we have been frontlines responders and we have been mental health professionals, you know, and all of these really practical things. And so it makes a difference, I think, in the morale that we have when we're in our institutions, and can make it really kind of difficult to be in these spaces. You know, like, I want it to be really positive, but I feel like right now the challenges are difficult, you know, and they're not easy. And so on a personal level, I think that one of the challenges also is kind of remembering your why you're in libraries, why you are doing this work, so that when it's feeling really difficult, you can kind of center that and root yourself in that. Because there are so many competing areas and arenas that we have to stretch ourselves into librarianship these days, and it's really easy to get distracted. But I think if we remember, at least for me, some of my why is, you know, to create a place of connection and healing for folks and learning and growing, that when it feels overwhelming, it helps me really to be able to focus. So yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for that. And you mentioned a lot of things that like we're dealing with, like very much so right now. Like this week, there was a challenge for a book here in Hawaii that Let's Talk About It. It was in the news and everything. Somebody saw it at the library, was mad that it was accessible to their children, grandchildren, and whatever. But it's like, you know, it's what it is. No, we're not going to get rid of it because you're mad. And like you said that about that too, like just we here, like we'll find our like LGBTQ materials just like in the trash can or something like that, and be like, oh, like I guess we're gonna have to clean this up and put it back up there. So they are real challenges that we see like every day here in libraries. And of course the discussion, I mean, I'm sure that all of us have had discussions with our families, like, what's the future of libraries? Everybody can just find it on computers now. And it's like, yeah, but you know, we're still valuable. We're still valuable.
It's that cultivation of information that I think family especially misses out, you know, and doesn't fully comprehend all the things that we do. Because even my family, they're like, oh, well, you just read books all day still. I'm like, I've been a librarian for 10 years, you guys. Like, you should get it by now. But just those stereotypes persist for us, no matter how hard we try.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
I always get the one of, well, it's just books, you don't need it. And then they need something researched for them. They need help finding that article. And you're like, oh, I know how to do that. I learned that one.
How to use Google properly also. It's a big one in my family. Let me do some instruction.
Yeah, no, they think that it's whatever, and then all of a sudden they're calling you to find them documents, to find them like forms for stuff, and it's like, oh, like libraries, we don't need you, huh? Like, but I'm helping you pay your taxes this year, so. But yeah, there's more to us than just books, yeah. But yeah.
Moving on to our next question. What advice do you have for current or graduating library students as they prepare to enter the workplace? What should we be focusing on? What skills are most valuable? That sort of thing.
Yeah, so I think that one of the best pieces of advice I try to give is to kind of be open to the many different paths that librarianship and an MLIS degree in particular can open up for you. When I started library school, I had a very specific path that I was going to be on. I was going to be a children's librarian, I was going to be a branch manager, and then I was going to get my PhD to teach in an LIS program. Like that was what I wanted to do. So, I mean, it sounds pretty cool. It still sounds pretty cool, but then everything started changing. And I really, like kind of as a first generation college student, I also didn't know what opportunities were available to me. And so that path started changing partially because it had to, because of the realities of the recession and the job search, but also because there were so many, look at that adorable keiki. Aloha kakahiaka. But the opportunities that were available, I think, are really exciting and inspiring because that MLIS can take you to any kind of library that you want to work in, but it can also take you to supporting and working for libraries and for librarians to be able to cultivate the work that we do. And so I think that that's a really interesting path forward, working in consortia and working in kind of those behind the scenes roles. So just be really open, I think, to where life takes you is a really important thing. And to kind of focus right now, I think some of the most important skills in any type of library are the soft skills that we bring to the work, like empathy and cultural humility and trauma-informed service, because everybody has experienced trauma after the last few years. It doesn't matter what experience you had, there is something lingering, in your body, in your soul. And so it's really important for us to be able to approach our work and to be able to approach our patrons holistically. And we also have to prepare ourselves, right? Like we have to be empathetic with ourselves. We have to prepare ourselves for the realities of the job. I know one of the really common things, at least with some library school students that I know who have never worked in libraries before, is once they get into that role and see, with the realities of working with folks experiencing homelessness or addiction or trauma and all of these things, that they thought that they were just a little bit going to be reading books or, just having wonderful story times. And so just making sure that you really understand the type of situation you're going into and also look for jobs according to what suits your skills, I think is really important. And of course, the tried and true skills that exist, programming, instruction, and leadership skills are essential in the job market today. I would say that a huge chunk of public library programming in particular is programming. Collection development is important, but programming is kind of our bread and butter. And one of the reasons I didn't go into academic librarianship was because of the heavy instruction load, right? I was like, I don't know how to be a teacher. I started off going to get my library credential, get my elementary school teaching credential. And I was like, I can't teach. Like, it's a whole different thing. So really understanding, also I didn't want to be in a classroom with 30 kids all day. I was like, I might lose my mind. So when that reality hit me on day 2 of my credential program, I quickly escaped. But just kind of knowing who you are, I think, is also really important, and discovering that in library school.
I really love that. And I think it's something that Dr. Wertheimer talked about in class the other day for us too, is that the program is to help us figure out our philosophy, figure out what we even want to try to do in libraries. I mean, I think there's a lot of us who are like, oh, it's fun, libraries are cool. And then it's like, but what do you actually want to do with them? I really love that trauma-informed service that you mentioned. That is such a, I like the idea of it. And it kind of made me think, like, what do you think about, like, I've seen library programs that have like a social work track in them and something like that, or like an aspect to them. What do you see libraries as like us, like a site of social work, of that kind of service in that way, or going forward in the future?
Yeah, I think whether or not we want to be, because of the disinvestment in social services like mental health care, right? And the way that we fund arenas like police and, all that kind of stuff, I think that we have become de facto social service institutions. And so I think that we have to really prepare ourselves for that. And libraries who bring in actual licensed social workers to be able to help library workers be able to accomplish the tasks that they were trained for versus that social work, I think is really important, and something that needs to be modeled more and more. Like San Francisco Public Library, I believe, was one of the first ones maybe 8 years ago or so, and more folks are taking it on, but I think that the increased need for it after the pandemic, I think is really signaling that we need that training, and we need it in a lot of different forms, whether it's beginning in library school or whether it's something that is on the job training, right? Because library school really provides us, with the philosophy, right? Like Dr. Wertheimer said, and figuring out how we come to operate around it, but that on the ground training really comes once you're on the job. And so making sure that our institutions are providing us with that training and that we are asking for that training when we are in these positions is also really important, because it's not going away unless suddenly the way that our whole government and finances and institutions are modeled changes, which is a much longer journey.
Yeah, I just see it more and more where it seems like librarians are being social workers, and it's like maybe that's something that needs to be just built into the curriculum now, like, or the expectation be be there, like, you're going to deal with this, you're going to have to, you're going to be calling ambulances for folks, and you're going to be talking people down for a minute sometimes. And yeah, just more fun things to heap onto our profession, I guess. It's like, oh, do we have to do this? But
it can be rewarding though, right? Like it's a lot and it's really overwhelming. But then also when you hear those stories of folks who come back and they say also, yeah, and to your point, Jennifer, exactly, like archives are not getting a whole lot of trauma-informed response, right? It's a little bit different in the cultivation. It's a lot of public and academic also, as our students are also experiencing these things, and school libraries, of course, as well. But when they come back, and they're like, I was experiencing homelessness. I had a cab driver one time taking me to the airport, and he was like, where are you going? I was like, I'm going to an American Library Association executive board meeting. And he was like, library saved my life. I was sleeping in my car. I had my daughter with me, but I went to the library every day, and the librarian helped me with my resume, helped me find a job, helped me practice for my interview, loaned me clothes for that interview. And I got a job, and we were able to pull ourselves out. And so those stories, although they are infrequent, when they come, I think that's also what makes it really, really rewarding to have had that training, to be able to do that work, to be able to help those individuals.
Yeah, well, that is incredible, and yeah, makes it all worth it in the end. So among other things, it's great. Don't want to be bagging on the profession, but
I know,
but
sorry.
no, it's all good.
What would you say are the ALA's goals in supporting Native Hawaiian and Pacific Island libraries? And in terms of support systems, what does ALA have in place for current Native librarians in their efforts to service Native Hawaiian communities?
Yeah, so the main thing, or the main arena that ALA does in supporting our Kanaka and Pacific Island librarians is the Spectrum Scholarship Program. So it is a program that aids students, library school students, with tuition, as well as creating a network of support and training to be able to finish library school and have a network once you graduate to be able to support you. I was not a Spectrum scholar, but I have been a part of the Spectrum family as a graduate, and they've really taken me in and made me feel like I had a community within ALA. There aren't that many of us in the Spectrum Scholarship Program. We usually maybe get maybe one a year, maybe 2 a year, if that. So that's within ALA. But really, I think that the place for us is within other associations, right? I think ALA is looking really big picture, right? Looking at the national level, the international level, and where we fit in. And so I think it's really important for us to know and to understand that we can create our own spaces that meet our specific needs, right? And acknowledge also, like, it's a little bit difficult with ALA, I think sometimes, like I've had some Kanaka librarians tell me, like, I am not going to join ALA because we are not American, right? Like that is really recognizing the occupied state. And so when we can find the spaces that we also belong in and feel like we belong in, that maybe will be that path to ALA so that we can make that change and feel like we belong and bring our Indigenous lens to understanding how ALA can also reckon with America's past and history, but also ALA's past and history, I think is how I became involved, because I became involved through participation in the Asian Pacific American Librarians Association, which was really important for me, as well as connections to the American Indian Library Association. So those two, we kind of fall into both categories a little bit. So you don't have to pick one, you can be a member of both and all of them, which I am, and to be able to support them. And so what those associations bring us is mentoring, networking, scholarships, leadership experience, and a real affirmation of where we belong. I did share yesterday that sometimes, and Neil talked about this, the Pacific in Asian Pacific can sometimes be a little bit isolating when there are not that many Pacific Islanders within the organization. But I've spent a lot of time also calling Apala out on that, and really having us push and understand that when we talk about these things, we are making sure that we also include Pacific in everything. The American Indian Library Association also has its own kind of like Spectrum Scholarship cohort for students. They just did a round and hopefully they'll get another one, but they did, the original one was called River of Knowledge and the most recent iteration is Bridging Knowledge. And I think there is a UH student in the Bridging Knowledge program. I'm not positive though, I can't remember the full list. But the graduates of this project, the intention is will bridge contemporary digital practices with traditional knowledge while allowing for culturally appropriate stewardship of sensitive materials. So the project will supplement curriculum, presentations, and poster sessions featuring scholarship widely available through the Sustainable Heritage Network, I believe. And I saw in the chat some shout outs also for ATALM and Piala and Lianza, the New Zealand Library Organization, Parbika for archivists. I think those are all really important. So I think it's finding your space, but also pushing ALA to make sure that we belong there and feel like we belong there.
For sure. Thank you for that. I was a Spectrum Scholar this last year, so I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I was able to go to DC. But it was kind of like what you were saying about it, though. I went out and I remember at one point they said, like, look around, these are your people. I'm like, my people are back in Hawaii. What you talking about? Like, I was like one of the only Hawaiians there, if not the only Hawaiian, besides you. But,
and I was only there for a minute.
Yeah.
I was there to say brown isn't down. Like,
yeah. Oh, I love that. It's like just because you're brown doesn't mean you're down. I was like, oh, we know those people. But anyway, that's I loved it. But no, I remember feeling like very like, are these my people? Is this my nest? But there are different things around. There are different professional organizations. That's why I've really part of why I really enjoyed being part of Na Hawaii Imiloa here. I was skeptical about like the value and purpose of professional or just organizations in general, but I got in. I was like, oh, it is a good space for us to all be together to, talk about stuff when we need to, and have that support. But yeah, and it's good to see that there are other organizations, all these Indigenous organizations as well, that we can turn to. But yeah.
And Jennifer is sharing her Spectrum experience also, 1/4 Asians and couldn't really relate having lived in Hawaii all her life. different experiences living on the continent for sure, which I think makes a huge difference too, like within the program and within ALA, because it's a lot of very continent-based lenses. And so to be able to have that really larger point of view can be difficult, I think. But I do also want to give an extra shout out to Nahawaii Miloa, because when Kavena Kumaji found me on Twitter and invited me into that space, I was like, this is what I've been looking for, like my whole library career. Like I felt so validated and welcome and open. So just extra shout out there.
Yeah, for sure. And shout out to Koa Luke here, as he just typed in. He's one of the founding members of Nahawaii Miloa. So yes, our esteemed kupuna, just kidding, Koa, you're not that old, but we do appreciate you and the work that you've done.
All right. How can libraries support culture and language in libraries?
Yeah, so I think that, it can be as simple, I say simple, but signage is never simple, right? Bilingual signage, multilingual collections, classes and programs and story times. My community has a very large immigrant Chinese population. So we have Chinese English story times, as well as some Spanish English story times. And that makes a really huge difference. And I think it really is also about understanding the needs of your community and what types of support they need within supporting their culture and their language. So last month, I visited the Tuscaloosa Public Library in Alabama, and it was the end of Hispanic Heritage Month, and they have an increasing Hispanic population of a lot of migrant workers that come in for agricultural jobs and such, and the library was having a really difficult time reaching them. And so last year, they had kind of just a very general Hispanic Heritage Month program, that had maybe 20 people in it. And they were like, what are we doing wrong? But they hadn't reached out to any of their community partners, right? Like within the Latino community. And so when they did that, they had this gangbusters, off the wall, huge festival that I was able to go to that had multiple Latin countries represented, where they were sharing stories of their heritage and their culture, firsthand experiences, as well as food. The local Latino radio station was there, like blasting mariachi music, and there were dancers, and it got, I think they said 2,000 people in the end of it, because they were able to really embrace the culture in an intentional way and not a surface way and a stereotyped way. And to be able to do that and to be able to support language also by having native speakers on staff is also essential, I think, so that when folks come in, they are able to communicate in the language that is most comfortable for them. So for instance, in my library, we were all English speakers until very recently. We also have a large Korean population, and we're able to hire our first Korean speaker, and we're looking for our first Chinese speaker. And so making sure that those hires, we're making space for them, as well as advertising them in very specific ways that demonstrate that that's a skill that we're looking for, right? Like, if we're in a library where Olelo Hawaii is widely spoken, then we need somebody on staff who is able to communicate in those ways. It is, of course, a little bit different for like academic versus public libraries and also archives and how we support these things. But I think the key is always the intentionality and being responsive.
Oh, I love that. You mentioned like some of your programming that you did, like earlier in your Ho'omau paper, and about like the Hawaiian-based stuff that you did in the mainland. And I'm really interested about that because, as I said, I was raised outside of Hawaii, and it, you never know where life will take you. And I'd like to be able to do something like that, but there's always there's so many things about it. It's like, how do you make this so it's not just like a cultural tourism moment? How do you make this so that it can be authentic, respectful, and just get community engagement? And it's like, how did they go for you? Did the community respond well? Did they turn out for it?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I have two experiences that can kind of speak to that. So I had Ho'omau, and then I also did a book called Hawaiians in Los Angeles, which was like a photographic history of the community. And so the first one was received much better when I did my thesis. And I think it was because of the way that we approached the work. It was from a very kind of educational lens, right? Like, and I followed protocol and who I asked I knew kind of the process for it, and I was very respectful. And also, you know, when I would come to folks, I would emphasize that I understand that we are often asked for invisible labor and for free labor and sharing our stories, and we don't often see the results of what that work is. And so I made a commitment to them to sharing what my thesis looked like at the end and what that final product was going to be, and to be able to give back. Right. And so one of my biggest advocates in doing that work was the Hawaii's Daughters Guild of Southern California. And they also helped to sponsor me through my undergraduate and my graduate through scholarship programs. And so I made the commitment to them that when I was old enough, because they had a 35-year-old age requirement to be a member, that I would come back, you know, and that I would help. And so I am now in that space where I am back and helping them. And I think that that really made a difference to be able to feel open and accepted. The Hawaiians in Los Angeles one was interesting because we had 5 different co-authors on it, right? And not all of them were from the community. And they really wanted to emphasize Hawaiians at heart and a little bit less Kanaka. And so we had, I just see your face, Ike. So
I got thoughts, but yeah.
Yeah, so we had like this constant struggle and pull, and it's very photographic based, right? So we're also asking folks to give us their personal photographs to publish for profit. And so like me and my husband as 2 co-authors made the commitment, you know, for any proceeds that we might receive from the book. I mean, we still have not, but someday we might, you know, to donate back to the community. But also the community was very hesitant to participate in that for many reasons. And so we actually, it's one of the largest text heavy books of that series, because we wanted to fill in the missing stories that weren't there for a reason, and to really also emphasize the impacts of colonization and the move of the diaspora and how that affects how we approach this kind of work, and also how the community could see it as profiting upon our stories. So it was a different receptions. And when it came out, they were like, why didn't you ask me to include my pictures? I would have included it. And everyone was like, she sent emails, like, but also, right, that's a community barrier too, right? Is I was sending emails and I was Facebooking people, but that's not how everybody is approached. But it's my introverted self that was like, this is how I have to do it. But anyway.
No. Part 2 or the deluxe edition can have all of the other bits. Yeah.
There you go. They're always like, when are you writing part 2? I was like, y'all, that was exhausting. Maybe someday.
Like, I don't know. You guys send me enough stuff, maybe. What?
Exactly.
But no, it's an incredible thing to undertake, though, and it is an important part of the story. Because, like I said, like my father grew up in Los Angeles too, as well. So, and I mean, my mom grew up in Utah, so I'm generations removed from Hawaii, but still Hawaiian, yeah. But yeah, I just like that at least somebody's collecting those stories, making it happen. Because I think it's so important. There's more Hawaiians outside of Hawaii than in Hawaii, and we have our stories. We don't stop being Hawaiian just because we're not there anymore. And leaving Hawaii is a huge part of being Hawaiian too, because, you know, a huge part of our history. There's all kinds of reasons why, socio-political, economic. Yeah, we all know. But,
that's a whole nother panel.
And not necessarily about libraries, but hey.
But related. I mean, institutional barriers.
Yeah. But oh man, we've only got like 10 minutes left. But maybe we can have this be a group discussion too, because this last question is a big one. But so, like, what does the future of Native Hawaiian librarianship look like to you?
Yeah, so I think that what I see is really the growing need for the type of leadership and introspection that we bring as Kanaka. Right. I think that we may not feel always like we belong or may feel marginalized, but what I do and what I've been trying to do is, you know, to get ourselves into positions of power, right? So that we can then bring others with us and lift each other up and be able to, you know, point to each other and say, this person can do that work. This person has that point of view, so that we do feel like we belong and we can see ourselves in these spaces and imagine it. And I think that, you know, to your point also, right, that there are more Hawaiians outside of Hawaii than there are inside, is that we really need to come together across continents and oceans to find one another and connect our realities, to be able to speak with this one voice so that we can support one another. You know, I think that one of the really beautiful things in preparing for this conference, you know, and through Na Hawaii Imiloa, was being able to find some of the folks who are also in libraries and Hawaiian on the continent, so that we can come together now, right? Like Neil, who was on the panel with us yesterday, finding how we can work together to make that collective voice has been really wonderful, and making sure that we have groups like Na Hawaii Imiloa, because that's essential to this work. And then I also hope that we bring more Native Hawaiian librarians home, you know, back to Hawaii, to malama our people and our aina, and protect and build our own collections, and imagine what our future looks like together, and to figure out together what spaces we need to be in. It is not easy work, and it's not always possible to come home, but I think that experiences like this experience for me, right, like being in this space with you all, I think has been really positive and affirming for me to know also that I can go back and forth if I have to, or I can come and stay. And so I think that meeting, you know, our Hawaiian folks in their journey wherever they are, I think is really important, because that's how we will be able to grow the Lahui, and make us all part of kind of the same library ohana and our own kind of thing, and figure out what that looks like for us. But I think it's positive, and I think it feels to me like there's some momentum right now to be able to do this work, and to be able to ingratiate it institutionally also, so that folks who are in those positions of power can write it into policies, can write it into job descriptions, and make sure that it happens.
Yeah, no, thank you. I love that. I think that we are like have a unique position too now, where connectivity is no longer so much of an issue. Like you're saying, like geographically, like we can be anywhere and still be able to connect with each other. But yeah, digitally, it's a lot easier for us to share our thoughts, our experiences with each other. But yeah, I think that I do, like I said, I appreciate Na Hawaii Imiloa more than I thought I would, because for that reason, because like, yes, we are able to come together, we're able to share our thoughts. I just wonder if there can't be just more, because there's just kind of us right now. But more of that, more connectivity. How do you think, somebody asked me once, as if I was going to know, like, how do you think that we can make libraries appeal more to Native, like the profession, appeal to Native Hawaiian people? Because they asked me in an interview and I was like, oh, no, I'm here.
Yeah. So I think Koa hit it on the head in the chat, actually, is that our institutions need to address the racism, settler colonialism, and to really reckon with what that looks like. You know, one of the things that we did in ALA was acknowledge that we started as a racist, classist, you know, institution, and really commit to changing what that looks like. But it's not an easy process. But until I think we start breaking that down and really having all of our library staff educate themselves on the behaviors and the structures of colonization that are learned and so entrenched that it's hard to have that decolonized mindset and really understand what that means. Until we start doing that work, we're going to feel marginalized, right? Like I saw another comment in the chat from Jade, you know, that the Hawaii students are tasked with the annual luau. Like, no, like we have to stop that kind of stuff and feel confident enough that we can say no. And so I think that it'll really change when we have those allies who have done that work to be able to work with us in it, because we cannot do it ourselves. So I think that that's a big part of it. And I think also just our institutions. No, I think that's most of it, actually. I'll just stop there. That's the big one. All the little manini stuff is not on the same level.
Yeah. No, I feel you though. Like when I started, one of the big motivating factors for me to go to library school, because I told everybody, I got a job in the library. I'm like, cool. Then I'm like, I'm going to go find anything else to do. But then, yeah, I was working in Hawaii. I'm at the Hawaii State Library right now. And there's maybe like 2 other Hawaiians in the building and one's in admin. So she's behind the desk all day. And it was like, wow, there's like, as a Hawaiian person entering the space, I'm not going to feel great about it in here. It's like, it's the same kind of folks that you see at all the other unfriendly state organizations, institutions. And so, yeah, I wanted to be a part of that because, I'm so appealing. No.
But I mean, it's true, like, if you're by yourself, you're not going to feel comfortable. Like that's why I think I was also really attracted to Apala, because I was never probably going to work with another Hawaiian in the same space, but there are also a lot of connections between Asia and the Pacific. And so be able to find those allies so that it does look more appealing. But then, it's important. It's important to have us in those spaces. And so for those of you who are alone or one of just a couple and they're so far away from you, like, thank you for representing, because it's making it possible, I think, for future folks to come through.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, we've got a couple minutes left, and I wanted to give time for anybody who wanted to ask questions, So I don't know if you guys want to unmute, if you want to ask in the chat. Have there been questions in the chat thus far?
There's one a little further up. Andrew asks, how could or should our students get involved in big ALA beyond Spectrum?
Yeah, please get involved. Come join me. So there are volunteer opportunities, as committee members. There is a special kind of, it's not a program, but if you've never served on an ALA committee, it's kind of like an internship program. It's called being a committee associate. And so it gives early career librarians, especially opportunities to sit on a committee and kind of understand and learn the process, but also not count towards your official committee service within ALA, so that you can get more time on different committees. So there is that work. There are also calls for task forces and working groups. If you are a member also of a division or a roundtable, there are different volunteer opportunities there. But there's also the space called ALA Connect, and it is a clunky space that not everybody loves. I will just say that. But it is a really great tool also for discussion and sharing and asking questions and getting feedback from the larger community. Librarians love to answer questions and give you information. So that's another aspect. And of course, attending conference, which can be very overwhelming. My first conference was in Anaheim, and I thought I would never go back to another library conference again, except that the president at that time was Dr. Lorene Roy, and she brought a bunch of folks from Hawaii. And the poster sessions, I was really able to connect with folks and see myself and where I thought I might be able to take my career. And so if anyone is going to be in Chicago, it will be my presidential conference. And so I would love to host folks and a reception or in my suite. So please let me know if you are planning to attend so that we can connect and be together.
All right. Thank you very much. I was able to go to this last conference, and I have all kinds of hangups about travel and whatever, but it was a cool experience. So,
well, travel is a whole thing in itself. And since we are also talking about ALA, your student chapter as well, of course, is a great way to participate, and your award-winning student chapter. So hold my ka ike on that award. Wonderful. And thank you for doing all that hard work too.
all right. Well, looks like we are pretty much out of time, actually. We're out here at 10:45. That really flew by. Thank you so much. It was a great discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your na'auao, your mana'o with us all. Really appreciate you for taking time to, talk to us lowly little students. No,
Future.
the first time an email from you popped up in my box, I was like, what in the world is happening?
No, thank you for letting me ramble and for creating this space. And anytime you folks want to call on me, please do. I am happy to, I am of service to you all. So thank you very much. Mahalo.
Right, well, thank
Mahalo.
you guys.
Thank
Mahalo,
you.
Lessa. Mahalo, Ikaika. Mahalo, Kylie, and everyone for participating. This has been wonderful to share this space. there is a session evaluation link in the chat, so please take a moment to complete that. And then it's also on the conference website if you don't have a chance this moment. We are going to be saving this recording so you can rewatch this, but enjoy the rest of your conference. Mahalo. Thanks, everyone.